beings, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I am the Woodland Witch. So I wanted to switch it up a little bit this week. The last few videos I've done have been a lot of education, a lot of information. So I wanted to change it up and do something a little more fun this week. So I thought it was the perfect week to do my part 2 of reviewing all of my decks. I have a part 1 sharing all of my tarot decks with you, some of my collectors, some of them I am in. I did a little review on each of them. So this week I thought it was perfect to do part 2 of that video and share with you all of my Oracle decks. As you can see, there is quite the stack, and we're going to start from the smallest to the largest. In my tarot review video, I shared that Oracle has become more of a preferred form of divination for me. Oracle decks tend to be a little bit more personal and a little bit more specific. Obviously in tarot, each card has traditional meanings, so I like that Oracle is a little bit more personal to the author and the crafter of the deck. Not that other tarot decks don't have different variations of cards and different meaning. I've just been really drawn to the Oracle lately. Okay, so the first deck we're going to talk about is the Antiquities of Magic. This deck is super tiny and it's got like a gothic Victorian feel to it. It's got the cutest little guidebook I've ever seen. Pretty basic, just black and white, nothing too crazy. But the deck itself I love. It definitely has like a really Victorian feel. The cards are really detailed and the edges almost look like burnt paper. One thing I really like about this deck is that the cards do have a tarot association with them. So it gives you specific cards that may correspond with what you've pulled out of this deck. I also really like this deck because it includes symbolism of all of the objects and items on the cards. The cards also have a little keyword at the bottom too to give you a little bit of insight as to what the interpretation of this card is going to be about. This is definitely like my go-to travel oracle deck. There's a lot of cards, but they're tiny and compact and very easy to carry around. It's also so my style. I love the Victorian floral vibe. It's just like top notch for me. This deck is the Four Agreements Oracle. The Four Agreements is actually a book. It's a book that's really helped me navigate being a little bit more in the public sphere. The four agreements themselves are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, always do your best, don't make assumptions. Those four agreements have reframed my way of thinking and really challenged the way that I go about living my life. Being impeccable with my words, only saying the things that I mean, not gossiping about people and putting negative energy in the way that I speak. Not taking anything personally and overthinking things, like there's always something wrong. If you are an overthinker like me or struggle with anxiety and high stress, this book is definitely for you. So the author also crafted this deck to coincide with his book, The Four Agreements. And I would say this oracle is a lot more about teaching, reframing your thought processes, seeing things from a different perspective. All the cards in here coincide with one of those four agreements. So on one side, it'll have like a little affirmation or something along the lines, and it will tell you which agreement this coincides with at the top. So this one is don't take anything personally. And the card says you are never responsible for the actions of others, but you are responsible for you. If someone is not treating you with love and respect, it is a gift if they walk away from you. You may hurt for a while, but your heart will eventually heal. This one is don't make assumptions, discern the truth. The artwork's really pretty on here too. I think the shape is a little different too, which I also like. If you have an opportunity to read the Four Agreements, I definitely recommend. It's very uplifting and transformative and really has helped me in my healing journey a lot. And I love that there are cards to coincide with it to give you daily reminders of the lessons that that book teaches. This one's my favorite. I've shared this one before all over my Instagram. I am obsessed with this artist, and her name is Jessica Rue. I have her art all over my walls. So when she came out with this deck, I absolutely had to have it. And that is the Woodland Wardens. Me being the Woodland Witch, I don't think there is a more perfect deck for me to have. This deck is just so freaking gorgeous. It is all Jessica's original artwork. This deck is a variety of combinations of flora and fauna, and it is based on plant lore, folklore, mythology, and history. Like I said, it's so beautiful. Similar to the Antiquities of Magic, it does have the little keyword at the bottom. It tells you what animal and what plant ally you're working with this card. The guidebook's super detailed. It has the entire image of the card, full description of the inspiration behind the card, and it also goes into upright and reversal meanings. Another thing I really like about this deck is that at the bottom of each description, you'll find one or two questions that pertain to the meaning of the card. These questions can be used as journal prompts or just something to think about when you're doing your reading. This deck is aesthetically pleasing, it's beautiful, it's all original artwork, and you can really tell how much work and effort and love was put into it. Honestly, I think that we all have this deck, and I'm pretty sure we all bought it at a TJ Maxx. And that is the Moonology Oracle. I'm not gonna lie, I do like this deck. I really do. It may be basic as hell, but I really do like it. It has the moon cycle on the back of each card, and all of the art on this deck is like watercolor paints. I think it's a really unique style, and I talked about it in my last video about how much I just really love artwork when it comes to decks. That's what draws me in first thing. So I do really like this deck. I use it pretty often. All of the cards correspond to either a moon phase, a specific sign that the moon could be in. There are special moon cards. Those deal with special events like the supermoon and the blue moon. And the guidebook is separated into like quite a few sections. So for every card, you're going to get the phrase, what it's corresponding to. This one is full moon in Cancer. And it will tell you the description of the card. It also tells you how to attune with the moon. So how you can best utilize this card in correspondence with the phase or the type of moon that you're working with. There's some additional meanings to this card and just different ways that you can approach utilizing its meaning. There's a little teaching at the bottom, which helps you interpret it and work with the energy of the card that you've pulled. Like I said, I got this deck at a TJ Maxx. It was not very expensive, and I think for the detail and the quality, it is definitely a deck that you might want to consider having. This deck I have dedicated to the goddess Bríet, who I work with in my practice, and it is the Celtic Tree Oracle. It is essentially the zodiac for trees. Similar to the runic alphabet, each tree has its own symbol, and each symbol has a specific meaning. This deck will show you what your birth tree is. It's different if you were born in the northern hemisphere versus the southern. For instance, my birth tree is the oak. This guidebook's pretty detailed as well. It tells you the birth dates that it's associated with in the northern and southern hemisphere, different totems that it's associated with, and deities, which letter it corresponds to. And some of them also have moon phase associations. This deck goes into a little bit of lore about each tree. There's keywords and takeaways for each card. It goes into upright and reverse meanings. But one thing I really like about this deck is it gives you like a personal message at the end of each description. And it's a message to channel the energy of the card. The art style on this deck honestly reminds me of that like AI feature that's going around on TikTok. Super colorful and vibrant. Each card looks like a little bit of a picture frame, and it does have the Om symbol on each card. It's only 25 cards, so it's a little bit of a smaller deck, but that's because there's only so many trees in the Celtic tree calendar. Overall though, I really love this deck. It's very nature-based, so it is right up my alley, and it really helps me connect with my goddess and my ancestry. This was my first one. This was my very first Oracle deck, and it is the Enchanted Blossoms Oracle. This one's friggin' gorgeous too. It's similar to the Woodland Wardens in that it uses different botanical pairings that are inspired by the Victorian language of flowers or by folklore and mythology, but everything is paired with a butterfly dragon. It's very whimsical and fun. The cards are very, very colorful. I really like the size of these cards. I haven't used this deck in like a really long time, but this is making me really miss it. As I said, this deck is all about a botanical pairing with a butterfly dragon. Now the butterflies are inspired by real species of butterflies, so it will tell you that in the description, and it gives you the folklore and the symbolism that these flowers hold in the Victorian language of flowers. And this deck also gives you journal prompts to consider and to think about, questions to ask yourself. I used this deck a lot when I was beginning my shadow work journey and I was having trouble like coming up with my own prompts. So if that's something that you struggle with, I think this deck is really helpful. It's beautiful and it makes me feel a little nostalgic because it is my first deck and I got it right at the beginning of my practice. Okay, this one's not like really an Oracle deck. It's more like mindfulness cards. You know, in every video we have to have one deck that has cards literally the size of my face. These cards are huge. I just don't understand it. But these cards are fun. Honestly, if you are feeling stuck in a rut, if you don't know what your body's telling you or what your body needs or what to do to care for yourself, maybe for self-love, or you're feeling stagnant and you want to try something new, this deck is fun for that. This card says to visit a location that you find inspiring or meaningful, plan a relaxing activity, unplug and take a social media detox. I think we all need that. Yeah, so these cards are little challenge cards. I really like them, especially if I, like I said, am feeling a little stuck, a little stagnant, don't know what to do or how to care for myself or how to maybe like separate myself from the craziness going on. There's different self-love acts in here of just like standing, looking at your body. There's 60 cards in here, so I think it would be really cool to do like a 60-day challenge where you draw one card every day and try to complete the task. It definitely inspires me to get more in touch with myself and my surroundings and just check in with myself every once in a while. I think we could all benefit from that in some way. This deck is my newest one, and it is also very special because it was gifted to me by the author. In my tarot video, I talked about my Wild Unknown tarot deck and how it was my first one, and I still use it every single day. So receiving the final installment of Kim Cran's collection of tarot and oracle decks, my life is complete. It's just an honor, truly. This is the Wild Unknown Alchemy deck and guidebook. This is one of the most creative decks I think I've ever seen. Love that it opens up like a book, just like a little magnetic opening here. The guidebook is hefty. I haven't gotten to play with this one as much yet, but just based on aesthetics, I'm obsessed. So as I said, this deck is based on alchemy. This is the box it comes in. Like, how creative is that? And the cards are hexagons. As my husband would say, hexagons are the besticons. I will say a lot of Victorian homes have hexagon windows, and I'm obsessed with that concept. So this deck is very reminiscent of Kim Cran's other decks, black and white with like pops of color. They're just beautiful. And if you're unfamiliar with alchemy, this deck gives you a whole entire intro to the concept of alchemy. It gives you resources, books to look into, full artwork on the pages. So you'll have the card that you're working with, the keywords for it, there's a whole description, there's little extras on the sides, and then there's a little section that says go deeper and to ponder. So the go deeper is like a mindfulness challenge, something that you can do in pairing with this card. So in this section it says read the poem The Core of Masculinity by Rumi. And then for to ponder, it says silence as power. I really like that. As you can see, I go for a lot of decks that give you challenges or journal prompts or things for you to go further with. This deck is super fun, it's beautiful, it's detailed, and as I said, I'm so honored to have received this deck from the author. It's super nostalgic for me, and I'm just honored to have been gifted and given an opportunity to work with it. Okay, we've got two more. I think I'm going to show this one first because we're just going to keep on that Kim Cran's train. This is the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck. My husband got me this for my solar return. Just like all the other decks, they open up like books, black and white, subtle pops of color. I love that this one is like metallic and iridescent. The back of the cards look just like my Wild Unknown, like a snake skin. And this deck is all different animals. So this deck is separated into element association. So each card fits under the category of earth, air, water, fire, spirit. And you'll see that element association at the top of the card. The guidebook is very basic, similar to the one in the Wild Unknown. I would say that Alchemy is probably the most detailed guidebook I've seen from Kim Cran's. So when looking at this guidebook, you'll get the animal that you're working with, as always the keywords. It's almost like telling a story. It tells a little bit of a story about this specific animal and what it symbolizes. And at the bottom, you'll see when in balance, when out of balance, and to bring into balance. So it gives you an opportunity to look at this card and see what aspects of this card are in balance for you, what aspects are maybe a little out of whack, and things that you can bring into balance moving forward. This deck is very similar to the Wild Unknown Tarot, so if you're comfortable with that deck and you've worked with it before, this might be a good oracle choice for you. Okay, our last deck. This is the Druid Animal Oracle. This deck has a slide-out case, and this guidebook is a book. It's a whole book. Very informational. I just realized a lot of my decks are animal-based or plant-based, but you know what? At least I'm on brand. These cards are very, very detailed, and when working with these decks, it's very important to pay attention to the border of the cards. There may be specific objects in the cards that you need to pay attention to or look for. These cards are also pretty big, but I'm giving it a free pass because I love it so much. So as I said, this deck is very heavily influenced by animals, and it is all sacred animals to the Druid tradition. The book will tell you exactly what animal you're working with. It will give you the keywords, what the animal symbolizes in this deck, and it also explains the image for you. So as I said, you're going to want to pay attention to the border of the image, little objects that are in the image, what the animal is doing, and that will explain that right here. It goes into the upright and reverse meanings, and then it also gives you different traditions, stories, folklore, what this animal represented in regards to the culture. As I said, a very, very detailed, lengthy guidebook. I also really like this deck because it gives you a ton of spreads to work with, and my favorite thing, it teaches you how to pronounce and say the animals' names in Gaelic, which to me in my practice is very important to try and utilize the language, to learn the language that was being spoken of whatever tradition I may be learning about and the history of the culture that I'm working with. Making an effort to learn the languages and the pronunciation of certain things regarding this culture is very important to me. So I love that it included that as well. Whew. All right, everyone, that is my Oracle deck collection. I hope that you all enjoyed seeing these Oracle decks and are maybe inspired to branch out and try something new. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.